Thanks very much. So this is a very tall podium, so I'm not going to actually stand there. I'm going to take a page from the SUSE playbook, and I'm going to walk around here just a little bit. But I did, before I start, I'm going to take 30 seconds from my remarks. Can we just give Masood another round of applause? We've all been there with technical difficulties. That was always a challenge to have to navigate, so great job. And I think what you all are doing in the Commonwealth of Virginia, this is my home state, but what you all are doing in the Commonwealth of Virginia is extraordinary as well. So, as was said, my name is Erwin Gianchandani, and I have the pleasure and the honor of serving as the inaugural director, or the inaugural head of the Technology Innovation and Partnerships TIP Directorate at the National Science Foundation. This is a directorate, the first new one in more than 30 years, as a matter of fact, that NSF has stood up. So we've been around as an agency for 74 years. We'll be celebrating our 75th anniversary next year, as a matter of fact. We were codified by an act of Congress in 1950, and for 74 years we have supported the frontiers of science and engineering, giving birth to a whole slew of innovations that we all rely upon today, like our smartphones and tablets, like access to the internet, like GPS connectivity, like, for example, the ability to be able to do organ transplantation and optimize that much more effectively, matching organs, donors, and patients as appropriate. That said, if you look at the formative days of the CHIPS and Science legislation, even before it was CHIPS and Science, even before it was passed by Congress and signed into law by the President, one of the things that I think folks recognized here in Washington in the policymaking lens, but then also in the administration at NSF as well, is just the intense competition that we see today for science and engineering all across the world. Many of you are here from around the world, and I think you would agree that today we face a moment in which every nation sees what certain nations have done over the course of the last many decades, and every nation is looking to invest in the frontiers of science and technology and engineering and mathematics and so forth in order to ensure that they can position themselves as a world leader, and they can use that progress in those areas as a driver for long-term success. We've also seen what happens when you don't invest as much as you should in some of these technology areas. For example, we saw in the early 2020s just the challenges that we faced as a nation with regard to semiconductors and microelectronics and supply chain vulnerabilities and so forth. And so I think one of the things that we are looking to try to do with the CHIPS and Science legislation, you're going to hear from my colleagues in the government who will talk, I think, more about the CHIPS part. I'm going to talk more about the and science part. One of the things that we're looking to do on the and science part of the legislation is to try to ensure that we don't wake up one morning and find ourselves on the precipice in AI, in quantum, in biotechnology, in advanced communications and so forth, in a whole host of key technology areas where other nations are investing and investing robustly, and where the US needs to also be able to invest in order to maintain our global competitiveness going forward. And so that, to a large extent, coupled with, I think, the rapid pace that we see with regard to the evolution of technology and the deployment of technology, and the importance of ensuring that we have Western values, US values, and like-minded nations' values driving the design, development, and deployment of those technologies. I think all of that was a fulcrum for the passage of the and science part of the CHIPS and Science legislation when it came to be 25 months ago, as was noted a bit ago. And so, in many ways, I view the TIP Directorate at NSF as the US government's response to the fact that we see other nations like the People's Republic of China investing $200 billion more projected by the year 2030 in technology and innovation than the US is currently programmed to invest. And so this in many ways is our response to try to be able to overcome that and ensure that we remain in the vanguard of competitiveness for decades to come. And so when I think about the TIP Directorate as sort of the strategic asset for the nation when it comes to the nation's security, when it comes to the nation's competitiveness, and when it comes to our prowess to be able to collaborate effectively with other nations around the world, there are three key pillars that drive our investments out of TIP at the National Science Foundation. The first is around trying to be able to accelerate technology development and technology translation into the market and into society writ large. NSF, now through TIP, has a long history of investing in technology translation programs. We were the first agency, believe it or not, in the federal government with an SBIR program back in the 1970s and 1980s. We were also the first agency with an I-Core program, NSF's Innovation Core, that now DOE and NIH have adopted as well, that provide for entrepreneurial education to talent that's looking to be able to move technologies out of the lab and potentially down the pathway toward commercialization. What is that customer discovery that you need to do to be able to identify the potential pathways for your concept or for your potential product? And so, in many ways, with TIP, we want to be able to double down on those types of investments, on I-Core, on SBIR, STTR. But we also want to be able to understand what are the gaps and opportunities in that journey from lab to market and society. You know, it's often called a valley of death, but I would argue that there's no one valley. It's really micro valleys along the way. And there are investors and investments that you can potentially tap into if you're trying to make that journey. But there are still those valleys that you need to overcome. And so it's incumbent upon us in TIP and at NSF and across the federal government for that matter to be able to identify what is our role in that ecosystem and how can we help get concepts through those earliest stages before venture and investors might come to the table to be able to help take those concepts even further. And it's why, in addition to scaling what we've long done with I-Core and SBIR, we are also trying to be able to find new pilots and explorations that we can pursue. So for example, we partnered with Noble Reach Emerge that you'll be hearing from later today around an effort to try to get commercialization advisors into laboratories, into research labs all across this country to be able to help guide faculty and students on potential pathways that are more likely to be commercializable than the pathways that maybe they had been traversing coming into the projects and the activities. In addition to thinking about lab to market, there's also other translational pathways that I think we are explicitly interested in. How do we help researchers take their ideas and move down the path toward open source ecosystems, which might offer competitive advantages vis-a-vis some closed box approaches that we often take? How do we help with getting researchers to harden and mature their technology to better position it for standard setting? We're not the agency that does standards, but we can certainly collaborate with our colleagues at NIST and help our research community bring their ideas closer to that, and so forth. And in addition, I will say that we also have launched a series of focused investments in some of the key technology areas that are called out in the CHIPS and Science legislation. For example, we have recently brought together academic and industry collaborators to form teams in the spaces of low latency wireless technologies, protein design, as well as thinking about novel approaches when it comes to biochemistry and biotechnology going forward. And we expect to do more in the years ahead. The second pillar for us, beyond technology development and translation, is around innovation ecosystem building. So how many of you have heard of the NSF Regional Innovation Engines program? Okay, so a lot of hands around the room. The Engines program, in our view, is a flagship effort for the TIP Directorate that's really about trying to be able to bring innovation to every part of the country here in the US. How do we really tap into the talent that exists in every corner of the nation? How do we harness the geography of innovation, the demography of innovation in that every corner of the nation? Just earlier this year, we announced 10 engines that we have funded to the tune of $150 million for the first 2 years, with the ambition to be able to provide them with up to $1.6 billion over the next decade, to really be able to put their specific locations on the map here in the US and globally around key technologies and pressing societal, national, and geostrategic challenges. We've funded advanced packaging in Central Florida. We have funded efforts around thinking through agriculture and AI in agriculture in North Dakota. Energy transition efforts in Louisiana, for instance, together with oil and gas companies that are headquartered there or have oil refineries along the Mississippi River and so forth. So what is your local asset? What is your local set of expertise that you're trying to bring together, and how can we provide you with the resourcing and framework to cultivate an innovation ecosystem for your region that will become the nation's and the world's leader in a particular technology area? And then finally, for us, the third pillar is around workforce development and talent creation. So this all stands on the bedrock of making sure that we are training today's workforce for tomorrow's jobs. And that means making sure that we are adept at meeting people where they are, We're an agency that's known for graduate fellowships. We're an agency that's known for supporting PhDs and PhD-trained scientists and engineers. But we also need to do our best to support folks at the K through 12 level, at community colleges and technical schools, provide experiential opportunities for talent that's looking to maybe pivot from a job they may be in today into a higher wage, better quality job of tomorrow. As a matter of fact, our experiential learning program has invested close to $40 million over the last couple of years into more than 50 projects across the country to bring regional consortia together to be able to enable talent creation through experiential internships, apprenticeships, and so forth in industry and state and local government and beyond. So I hope that you walk away from this with the sense that across these three pillars, accelerating technology development and translation, accelerating the new innovation base for the nation for the 21st century, and accelerating workforce development and talent creation, we are focused on how do we do this in a way that really moves the needle for the nation in these key technology areas. And how do we do this also as a whole of government effort? So we have partnered, for instance, with the Economic Development Administration's Tech Hubs program. The engines and the tech hubs are very complementary efforts. In fact, many jurisdictions have received layered in investments of engines and tech hubs on top of one another because we see the engines as feeders into the tech hubs going forward. As the research coming out of our efforts helps to support the work that the tech hubs are trying to enable. We've also just recently announced a collaboration back on the CHIPS side with the Department of Commerce around workforce development, the National Network for Microelectronics Education. So to us, this is an all-of-government effort, and I'm really excited to see the types and depths of collaboration that we've seen over the course of the last 2.5 years that have been catalyzed by CHIPS and science. And finally, I think it's important for us to do this in a way that's responsible, ethical, safe, and secure. And so we have an investment specifically in that space to try to be able to design in that responsibility element and the guardrails around these technologies from the very start. So I hope this gives you a good sense of where we are 2.5 or so years in, maybe just over 2 years in, since the passage of the CHIPS and Science legislation. We have a lot more work to do, and we're counting on folks down the street on Capitol Hill to give us the resources to continue that work in the years ahead. Thank you very much.